Is that, I guess that answers the question. So, well, we will get started. Good evening, everybody. It is Wednesday, the 26th, about 4 p.m. So this will be our first meeting of the College and Career Readiness Committee. Representative Henderson and I chair this committee. We're going to alternate, I guess, managing the meeting, facilitating the meeting. That way, it'll just keep it simple for everybody. We do have an agenda that went out in advance. I do want to thank Kathleen for sharing the agenda. And I believe we have an hour for this meeting, so I'm just going to jump right in. The first thing on our agenda, if I'm not mistaken, is I believe discussion about education as a civil right. Is that correct? All right. I don't know if we have a certain amount of time allotted for that, but we have 4 things. So let's try to keep everything to roughly 15 minutes, just to manage ourselves like loosely.
Representative Thompson, I don't mean to interrupt you. Are we supposed to take roll, or do we not do that in committee meetings?
I don't think it's necessary. We can take it if folks want to take it, but I can kind of see that everybody's here.
Okay. I was just asking because, like, in the other meeting, they took roll, so I just wasn't sure if that was something that we're supposed to do. I'm new, so that's why but we don't have to if that's not how this committee works.
It's not.
I wrote down who's here. It's easier to do with a smaller group.
So never mind.
All right then. Education and civil right.
Okay, I'm here. I'm off camera because I'm actually driving from a meeting that I had. So excuse me for not being on camera. Just coming from a gifting event that I had earlier today. I won't need the whole 15 minutes. Basically, what we have is that we've talked about this a lot. We've had a working group, but at the last one of our last meetings, working meetings, referred it to this committee to discuss what will be the next type of actions that we're going forward. I believe everyone should have in their possession at this particular time, all the committee members should have a copy of a proposed draft of the resolution that I wanted to put forward at some point. I wanted to make sure that this committee could discuss those items that are in it, each line. At this particular time, what I'm planning to do in this particular area is to do community engagement, which was encouraged by multiple people, including my peers here on the state board. And so that's basically where I am with this, is like setting up a structure for over the next couple of months to do community engagement, to make sure we hear from all stakeholders at every single level about this proposed resolution. And then after that has been conducted over the next couple of months, proposing it to go to the public meeting to be voted on. So that's the basis of everything. Questions?
Do folks have questions?
Could you remind me when the draft resolution was circulated? When you circulated the draft resolution?
Because I'm driving, I can't say right off the top of my head.
Okay.
I'm more than happy to send it out. I'm about 15 minutes from my house that I can send it out again. But it went out over a month ago, I would say, at this point. So I'm more than happy to resend it to this committee, to the members of the committee.
I'm sure I can find it. I just wanted to make sure I had the right thing.
Yeah.
My memory is of at the February working session. I believe that's when it was discussed, because I did miss the March one. And then there was further discussion about not just the resolution itself, but would it be something else? Would something else be done with education as a civil right?
Yeah, I mean, I
think the topic was referred to the committee in general.
I think that's my confusion. Is my understanding was the topic was referred to the committee to decide what the committee would do with it. But it sounds like there's a different plan of action.
Okay, I guess, what was your understanding is that the committee would decide if we could even take up the topic? Is that your understanding?
I think I don't, not just if we would take it, like if we would take it up, if we did take it up, what that would look like, because it was referred to committee.
Uh-huh.
And I mean, we can go back and look at the notes from the meeting. I wasn't aware that there were other actions outside of the resolution that we were considering, but my recollection was there was a draft or proposed resolution, and outside of that, the topic was referred to committee.
Okay, and I would agree with that particular synopsis, so to speak, or summary, Ebony Rose, in the sense of talked about the resolution. I think there was a lot of discussion about and that's a concern if it went to the council. I believe it's a lot of the concern if it was proposed as a legislation. And I think if that were to be done, and I'm not proposing that at this particular time, I think that's a discussion for the committee to say, well, we'll support a resolution, but we won't support, something going beyond that point. So I'm open to all that conversation.
Okay, I'm hesitating because I just want to make sure I understand what the ask is to us at this point. Like what?
So the ask is, there is a draft resolution that I did send out. This committee, hoping that this committee will review that resolution, provide any input, any changes, revisions, thoughts around it, for it to prepare it for, presentation at a public meeting to be passed is what I'm looking for. And during that interim time, we'll also, as was encouraged, engaging the community, how we can engage the community. Those are the things that I'm looking for to hear comments on from the community. From this committee.
So, oh, sorry.
No, I was just going to note that Jim put the resolution in the chat for folks, but go ahead.
Thank you.
I just have a question, I guess, for clarification. So does this, I don't want to call it like a working session, but like, President Patterson, are you asking that we kind of have like a mini working session in this committee to look over the resolution and to look over community input and feedback, and then we figure out what to do with it from there? Or am I misunderstanding?
It's not so much as a decision of what will happen with the resolution. The resolution will be, what I'm proposing is that the resolution be proposed at some point. The committee, and what I'm asking the committee to do is provide any revisions, thought process on that particular time, and then the committee, present it or remand it out of committee to be voted on in a public meeting.
You want to wait until you do the community engagement? Or like, let's talk about community engagement first before we review the draft, because ideally we would have that incorporated. And I don't think they should be parallel. Like, I think we should know what people are saying before we tell you what, like, feedback on this resolution.
But I'm sorry. I thought, and tell me if I am singular in this thinking or understanding. I thought the fuller topic was referred to committee. Is that wrong? Based on the notes, understanding, or am I the only one who understands it that way? I also would like to be clearer when it says like, we will do engagement, like who is we? Yeah. And I will say that question is not just to President Patterson. I'm looking for others as well, because I hear, I'm not trying to put you specifically on the spot.
Yeah, I also thought it was the topic more so than this particular resolution. So I'm still a little
Well,
unclear on that. And I agree with Kathleen about the timing of well, I guess I'm of two minds on that because it is helpful a lot of times for people to react or respond to something. But we want the community input to inform if there's a resolution or whatever form the resolution takes.
So to answer your question, Ebony Rose, my understanding, once the resolution was talked about in the working meeting, and the reason why I did, give it to everyone, every person was not, we were not talking about the topic itself. We were talking about the resolution. So it wasn't if we're going to engage in the topic of education as a civil rights, because we've done that over a long period of time. It was more so dealt with the resolution. That's my understanding. And if someone who was at that meeting can point me to some other language that says different, that was the whole reason for me even, kind of putting out the resolution and offering a draft with that. We were definitely referring it to a committee, the resolution, not the topic, the resolution, to talk about. And in that interim time, while we're talking about it at the committee level, while you're talking about it at the committee level, there would be community engagement. That was my understanding from the discussion we previously had.
Excuse me, President Patterson. I always thought that the community engagement would drive what would eventually be in the resolution. I thought that's what we were saying.
I think it can add to the conversation and how the resolution is written. And for some of the definitions that were at question, like what does a quality education mean? But I was offering the resolution as a starting point, because if we go back, basically there was a memo that was disseminated that became the discussion point, and the question was called into from my peers, basically, is what are we really working from? What is coming from the state board that we're actually working on? Hence the reason I drafted a resolution and presented it in a meeting.
I mean, I wanna I wanna make sure I'm saying this correctly. I recall the conversation about the resolution and it coming to the meeting, and if it was being considered. What I think I am less so, what I think is news or newer information is the how, and what would be and what is the ask. And so I thought we were going to talk about if we were going to take this up as a board and how that would look. I also, because I remember that conversation, and I'm happy to go back to the meeting notes again, but I did look at the meeting notes in preparation for this meeting, because it was also like, I might want to propose a task force. And then it was referred to committee for us to discuss what would happen with this. And so I think that is the delta between what you are saying to us in this meeting and where my understanding was starting from. And so I just want to acknowledge and be upfront about that, just based on where we left the conversation at the February working session. And I can also appreciate if more thought has been given to this since then, because you mentioned feedback that folks said, and I guess I would not be folks, but people suggested more engagement. And if you have some ideas that you want to share with us about what that would look like, because I want to be clear that I'm trying to understand more so than anything else. Like, what is the ask? what is our role, where we see the responsibilities lying, like that kind of thing. Because I clearly understood this differently based on where we left the working session in February.
I can appreciate that. One thing I'll say is that it was never a consideration for a task force. It was always basically to bring it to the committee because it had already went through a working group that had met periodically, but not as much as it should have prior to. That was reported out. And once that was reported out of what came out of that, we decided that, look, we needed something to work with other than just a memo that we had. So that's when I drafted this, to reiterate that point, drafted a resolution, which, like any other resolution, I'm believing, goes to a committee, and the committee does its particular work on, the context of it. It's not a question of if they'll take it on. From my understanding, they weigh in on it. Is what I've seen in the past, and maybe this is different in this particular case, but that has been the case in other resolutions that's come up, and I believe we have some other ones that are in other committees. And then once that has been taken up by that committee, they remend it out for a vote in a public meeting. So that's my understanding. That was my thought process, and explain it. If it came across some other way, then that's my fault for misunderstanding it. But that was my understanding of what would happen, what would take place, is that this committee would take the resolution, provide feedback on it, over a course of time. We didn't set a time, and during that particular time, community engagement, which was requested by various stakeholders, could be done at the same time, simultaneously. So the ultimate ask is for a resolution to come out of this committee, whether this committee has weighed in on.
So my experience has been if a resolution is referred to a committee, then the committee would work on it and then vote whether or not to take it back to the full board. So we would have some work to do before that step in the process.
Okay, so do we need to, I'm sorry, y'all, I'm thinking forward, okay, next steps, solution oriented, okay, what do we need to do? So is the logical next step to, one, for us to take a deep dive into the resolution and then take and do a round of community listening? Or are we trying to go somewhere else? Because I do think it is important, though, that the community that we have to include the community, especially parents and families, because this would be affecting them the most. And I mean, all parents, all families, especially in Ward 8.
I think the place that we're starting from is so in the past, when there have been requests for folks to take up work in committee, and I think this is why there was a bit of back and forth today, just getting clear on what the ask is. We would have to at some point vote we would have to vote the resolution up or down. That's the thing, because it's now in committee. But we also have the latitude to decide what work needs to be done. I think what I was trying to get clearer on and what would be helpful now, I do think that we should discuss what is in the resolution, but I would also imagine that if there are stakeholders who are interested, which has been stated, and there are thoughts around what community engagement would look like, that could also be shared now to help us think about how to craft aligned steps, right? And so I don't know if that makes sense to others, but I think I'm glad we had this conversation because I do think that we were not necessarily starting from the same place.
And just to note that our committee goals and priorities is coming up on the agenda, so we can talk about how different things will fit together.
So my question would be to the committee is, would the next step be to ask, you guys would want how community engagement would happen during this particular time? I believe that's what you asked, Representative Thompson.
I think I'm asking for what and maybe I think I'm asking for two things. One, since you are saying you've already given some thought to this, I would like for you to share those thoughts so we can so we can discuss them, we can include them, we can, I don't believe we should be starting from zero or on a separate or different track. Two, I thought we were also going to use this time for you to share more about your thoughts around this, to discuss anything like why, like some of the things around like where we are in this, why you thought this was important, how you want to see this, all the things. I used the word task force earlier because it came up in the working session because you proposed a task force not as a we have to do it this way, but because it just trying to give a synopsis of where, again, based on the notes, I understood the discussion left off. And so we had this set on the agenda for your time to give any information that you think will be helpful to the committee.
No problem. So the reason why, let's start with the reason why I think this is particularly important. I think some of that has happened or has been explained over the course of having a working group and some of the panels that, well, we had a whole panel on this particular subject matter. So a lot of things has happened that kind of seems out of sequence, I guess is the best way for us to say this. But we want to make sure that we have full engagement by stakeholders, which was addressed when we had the panel. So I believe it's more important, even more so now, after all the events that we've currently seen happen with at the federal level, that has affected the ability for children to get a quality education. I think some of the misnomers or the misconceptions of the proposal when it was first done is that it would result in vouchers or it could affect home rule, or there were some other things. But I think a lot of things have happened at this particular time, which points to a larger issue of how do we make sure that children can get a quality education, that they have a means or a lever when those things are not happening, to get redress is my thought process around this. We've just saw the gutting and the dismantling of the Department of Education, including its Civil Rights Office. And so when we're talking about kids being able to actually discuss or take any action toward ensuring that they get a quality education or education at all at this particular point, we need to, at the local level, especially as we see this federal government saying things will be remanded back to the state, so to speak, and that was the justification for dismantling the Department of Education. We need to state, I feel, we need to state, and there are others that feel the same way, what is the District of Columbia's thoughts? How is it enumerated? How is it codified that we can and we're going to provide a quality education for District of Columbia kids? So that's the rationale behind it. At this particular point. As far as community engagement, I've had a number of suggestions from groups that after the panel said they would like to engage, whether that be PAVE, the lawyer group, the Washington Lawyer Group, and other groups, stakeholders that would like to be engaged. What I would do is to reach out to each one of those groups to allow them to either have a panel or to speak on the particular subject, bring whatever they would need as far as understanding, whether that's members or lawyers or whatever the case may be, to discuss the issue and to hold a series of community engagement sessions, co-sponsored, so to speak, with those particular groups to ensure people had a clear understanding of how it would affect us, both as for students and stuff like that, but on the larger scale of home rule, you know, control board, all those things, all the questions that come up. So as far as engagement was to be identifying those particular groups that we would want to host those panels or co-sponsor those panels to doing community engagement. I know PAVE has shown some interest in that. I've also got an inquiry from, and you may be aware, from Ward 7 Education Council, Representative Thompson, to host, panels so that people could engage this. And so that would be the community engagement that I would engage in, or this group would engage in. So.
Do folks have questions or comments?
So if, I just want to make sure that I'm right, President Patterson. We're saying, let's start with the engagement, get input from the community to help drive the resolution's language, then vote it through committee to see what happens next, or get a vote to see what happens next.
That is my hope. Yes.
Okay. That makes sense that the engagement would drive the language for the resolution. I'm in favor of starting with the engagement to help drive the resolution's language, to, figure out what's next, to figure out what is this, what's next. That's just my thoughts.
I think we can talk about this, if it's okay. We can talk about this as we, if there are no other questions, as we discuss our committee goals and priorities, like the how and the what. I will, because we got to think it through. I will say that with respect to what not just I received, but the other members received from the Ed Council, I don't think it was so much that they were looking for engagement. I think it was more that they were opposed to this being taken up altogether. They don't. So I do think that one of our steps should be to review what's been shared and submitted so far, whether it's from the Washington Lawyers Committee, the expert, and others on the expert panel, which were assembled. But I did not interpret what the Ed Council shared as that they were looking for more engagement around this. I think they're actually looking for this to not move forward, to be frank.
Okay. And if I may, from my understanding, in engaging the president of the Ward 7 Education Council and looking at the letter, I guess I'm unclear, because in the letter, she specifically, the president, asked me to come to a group to talk about it. So if they're already have made the decision not to take it up, that's not what the letter seemed to be saying. It said, we would like to engage you. So
I think they want to hear. I think that this and I don't want to speak out of turn, but as I understand it, they would like to share all the reasons they think this is not helpful, and quite frankly, if I was to use the words of that person, dangerous. And so I don't want that to be, and I'm only saying this because it was specifically called out here. And I don't want to be, I don't want to be, I don't want the sentiment to be taken out of, I want to be as true to what I know they think and feel as possible, especially since I am the Ward 7 representative. Would be remiss if I did not share what I knew and speak up, because literally my job is representative. They have some serious concerns with education as a civil right as the conversation has gone. They do not actually think it is helpful to advancing many of the things that I know that we all as colleagues share, not only because of the questions about what the remedies be, what would the remedies be and unintentional consequences and threats to home rule, but I don't think it's so much that they are wanting more engagement around this as a conversation in that manner. I think they actually would like the conversation to shift. And so I think they would like an audience to share with you all the reasons they feel that way. But I don't want to imply that it's either neutral, the feelings are neutral, or even that they are supportive, because I know that to not be true.
Okay. And as a representative just across the board, not as president, I'm always open to hearing from the community. As the at-large representative who is proposing this, I'm open to hearing their comments on this particular issue. So I'm more than happy to take that that meeting, so to speak. What I'll say is that to the committee is that I will continue to seek during this interim time other entities that want to engage on the matter, that want to hear more about it, so to speak, that have not made up their mind, so to speak, of how they feel in this particular situation, to get a larger understanding of other thought processes.
Go ahead, jump right in.
Thanks. Thank you, Representative Thompson. I just really want us to center vulnerable communities. And whatever engagement we do, I really need us to center Black families and families of color, especially with everything going on. I understand about all of the things that are happening, but when we're talking about something like civil rights, I understand that different folks may feel different ways, especially with this different congressional environment. But I think sometimes I feel like organizations and other folks kind of overshadow like the everyday folks who are affected by this on the daily, on the ground. And so I just really want to ensure that we are centering their voices. I want to share more, but I think I'll hold because I don't want to infer.
Right. And to respond to that, Representative Johnson Law, what I'll say is that is the intent of the community engagement, because I believe everyone coming off the panel wanted to have more understanding of what this actually meant. I know there are different narratives that may be out there, and people have feelings about those particular narratives. So the community engagement would be able to clarify some of the thought processes, address concerns that I believe members and community folks outside of the State Board of Education may have. So I believe that by having robust engagement on the subject matter would help move this whole discussion along. And then after a course of community engagement, we as a body, the State Board of Education, can decide where we go next with it.
Thank you, President Patterson. That's helpful. I always want to make sure, Ward 8 is uplifted, especially, with everything going on in Ward 8 right now.
It is my my intent, of course, as a Ward 8 resident, to ensure that those have been the most marginalized and the most impacted by what is happening currently to the civil rights and education specifically are truly informed on, what does this mean for us going forward? What are the guarantees that they have for themselves What actions can they take when their civil rights, so to speak, are violated to them accessing a community, a quality education? And I think it's very pertinent to right now because we're seeing a dismantling of an agency that's supposed to actually look out for this, but basically the major part of their work is now gone and their lawyers are now gone. I think we need to respond to let parents and students and educators know what are my rights? What rights do I have as I try to provide a quality education as an educator? What are my rights as I try to obtain a quality education? If I have a child with disabilities, what does that mean? You know, where do I get redress when those aren't addressed? I think it's important that we have this conversation right now as we go into a convoluted way of doing education because of the current federal administration that we have.
Thank you, President Patterson.
Yeah, I mean, I hear and appreciate all of those comments. I do want to be unequivocally clear when I say this. I not only do I represent Ward 7, but I understand what makes up the Ward 7 community. And I'm, of course, intimately familiar with the Ward 7 Education Council, given the amount of years I spent as more than an active participant in that organization. I would say that Ward 7, by and large, is Black people, it's brown people, it's poor people. We have our fair share of students with disabilities. We have students who are English language learners and all the things. And so I do want to be very clear that when folks in Ward 7 say they have concerns about something, they too are marginalized and voices should be respected and uplifted. And so I know that we all represent our respective communities. And I know that we all share certain values of equity, which is why I said that I don't think it is a matter of if we share certain values. I do think it is a matter of folks saying like, hey, I'm concerned about like this and how we get there. And so my comment was more reflective of there are concerns about this, not because they don't, folks don't want the same things you all want. I don't want that to be added as color, but you know, I think those conversations need to be had. And I don't want to misrepresent saying that folks are encouraging or supporting engagement because that would be dishonest of me. And so I just want to be upfront about why I said that. Yeah.
Yeah, can I jump in?
Yes, please.
I think as currently constructed, I think there's still like too many questions for me. What is a high quality education? So the definition, we talked about that, like, okay, let's figure it out. Let's get that concrete definition. What's the accountability measures? What's the process for equitable relief? What does that entail? But my biggest question is like, if we are, you know, if the statement is made or we're all putting on the line, like for me personally, like I'd rather do it for something that's more than a symbolic statement. So like, how can we make sure that if we're doing it, it's actually more than just a symbolic statement? Because there's a lot that's actually on the line for this, and I want it to be more than just a symbolic statement. So I love the thoughts behind it. I just think that like there has to be something else there for me to be like, yo, like like I'm all in right now. And I like I said, I think the sentiment behind it is very important. But you know, as currently stated, I just still have like way too many questions, if that makes sense.
And if I may, Madam Chair, what I'll say is, because I know we're at time, I know you gave a lot at 15 minutes, and I don't want to overstate anything. I'm happy to try to provide any clarification if need be, but I don't want to go over the time that you guys allotted. But what I will say is that I hope that everybody will, if you haven't had the time to really delve into the resolution as it currently stands, I think a lot of questions can be asked for the simple fact that we actually had a panel on it. And I think the resolution tries to answer a lot of questions that were previously brought up about certain things. You know, would this result in more vouchers? Can they get monetary recourse, or if they sue and stuff like that? I think a lot of those questions is in the reading and in the resolution of what can and cannot be done. So I think a great starting point is to look into the resolution and begin for this committee to begin to, you know, form their questions or their revisions or whatever the case may be. And at the same time, have the community engagement with those that would like to have the community engagement, have a clear plan of, and I'll present that to this group of what that community engagement looks like, so that we make sure that we are being very transparent and it is a process that has integrity to really hearing from the community, um, those communities that we all represent. So I'll leave it at that.
All right, thank you. If there are no other clarifying questions, we'll talk about the, the how and the consideration of prioritization in the 2025 committee goals and priorities.
All right. Well, I'm going to exit you guys, and I hope you guys have a great meeting. I came to present for that particular reason. I know you guys have a quorum, so it won't be affected if I should leave. So have a great meeting. I'll talk to you guys later.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye, President Patterson.
Bye-bye.
All right. Our next agenda item is graduation requirements. I just want to preface, we don't have new information from OSSI as far as any timeline changes or anything like that. So the last information that was shared with the board was at the working session that they came to, goodness, was it January? December? It's been months. So in December, November. Wow. Okay. A long time ago. Feels like a long time ago to me. I do want to note that OSSI does consider what they presented us in November a starting point and something for us to respond to, not anything written in stone. And again, we haven't received any updates. We did have a meeting with the DME, which was referenced at the most recent working session, where he asked about some of the questions from the previous committee, and just like he thought they were very thorough and pointed questions. Representative Henderson, tell me if I'm misstating anything that you received from that meeting. And he also asked about why we might consider the possibility of a task force. As I understood it, he just wanted to make sure that one of our goals was to stay in communication and collaborative with OSSI, and that we didn't go two completely different directions and then have a lot of work to do to reconcile once approval time came. I'll stop there for a moment. Representative Henderson, am I saying anything that sounds crazy, or am I missing anything?
No, I think that's right. And the way the DME left it was that they were open to a joint engagement task force. And so I think what you outlined, Representative Thompson, I think is a great place for us to start. And my only questions about what you proposed were just kind of how we would make sure that we sync up with what Aussie has already done. And so kind of like where, I'm not 100% sure like where they are right at this moment. As you said, what they shared in November was an opening, and they have been getting feedback and have changed their thinking in some regards. And I don't know where that stands in terms of how close they might be to a second iteration, and just having that sync up with what you've outlined. And then I was wondering about the makeup of the task force. You recommended no more than 20 members. And I was just wondering a little more about the selection. You suggested an open application process, and I'm wondering how we and Aussie together would select um, the members.
Yeah. So I think I want to start from um, we. I wanted to at least put down on paper something for folks to respond to. So I totally, and if people need a moment, I sent an email earlier today. It was later than I expected it to be, but I sent an email earlier today. I just responded back. It's in the same thread, which I'm sure some folks used to join this meeting. So Kathleen, thank you for starting that thread to try to put what would be some of the goals and priorities, what some suggested framework around composition could be in that type of thing. But I do want us to kind of make those decisions together. I want to hear feedback because I know I didn't consider everything, but I wanted to kind of give it some bones for folks to put meat on. And so let me ask first, do folks want, because it's bullet, so do folks need like 2 minutes to read that, or I can tell Representative Henderson's already read it. Do folks need like 2 minutes to take a look at that so we can discuss? And when I say folks, I mean Representative Vest and Representative Johnson Law.
In the chat, Representative Best said yes.
Okay.
Yeah, it's fine with me. We can keep going.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
We can keep going.
Okay. So I heard, I think, 2 questions, and I'm happy to start to answer those and ask for others' thoughts as well. So as far as the first question I heard was about composition, I suggested no more than 20 members because I wanted to allow space for us to talk about who the stakeholders should be, what representation should look like. But then I would also imagine if it's more than 20 people, and I feel like 20 is still a lot, but if it's more than 20 people, like I feel like there has to be a cutoff, right? So I wanted to start with at most, I can't imagine it's more than 20 people. And then for us to kind of use our shared judgment around who those people should be. I just don't want it to be more than 20. I'm totally open to anything less than 20, but I felt like I needed to put some type of, like, I know it just can't be productive if it's this many people in the conversation. Again, not wedded to that, but that's how I'm thinking about it, like a cap. So that's the first thing. The second thing, as far as like I think the second question, and tell me if I'm wrong, like how would we decide?
Yeah, how would we select among applicants?
I think we should discuss that. I know that for the graduation task force, so I think 2 parts. For the high school graduation task force that happened maybe 7-8 years ago now, they actually did do an open call for members that were like community member type of people. That way we're not just going to, like, we can open it up beyond some of the people who just show up in front of us all the time. We might still want to consider some of those folks, but I'm hoping we can diversify some of the voices. What they did is they decided on a couple different questions, and so they had a light application, and then they anonymized the application, so it wouldn't be like, okay, Ebony Rose is applying. We know it's Ebony Rose. So no matter what she says, she gets on, right? So that's what they did. I actually think that was I think that was good. And I think that's worth doing again. I think it would also just encourage us to get out and say to folks, hey, we're about to have this discussion, like, and like prime the public. So that's my first thought. I think we should reserve, in my opinion, we should reserve some seats for folks who we know need to be part of the process. So like, I would love to talk about what OSSI's representation on the task force looks like. Like if we could get a staffer from OSSI, I think that we want to make sure that some of our LEAs, because especially when they raise questions about like either like things that are already happening, like bright spots, or they can talk about like implementation, like certain things that we kind of consider in conversation. Maybe somebody does SPED really well. Like we want to think about LEAs, and then we want to think about things like, you know, students. So I would like us to think about like, all right, what are the categories of people? I would love for us to get like some also like business or like somebody from higher ed. And so I want us to just think about who the slot should be. But I am suggesting some type of open application process for what I would call community, parent, or student voices. Those are my initial thoughts.
Yeah, so I thought that the categories that you had checked all the right boxes. And I think it's especially important that we get representation from the higher ed and the and business side, because they are not always included in this. I'm sorry, I realize there might be other questions about what you've proposed, but I think, so would the next step be to like for us to kind of you know, tweak this if we need to tweak it, and then
Yeah,
take
I
it to
think
Aussie?
yeah, I think that, so what I'm suggesting, and I want to make sure that folks kind of get their questions out on the table. And again, not that like I have the answers to all the questions, but I'm framing this as just things we should be thinking about, because people might have better, stronger, or clearer thoughts than I have at the time. But I think I'm hoping that we can start to say, okay, make some suggestions on what it would look like. We would also, and say like, all right, so we want to have two parents. We want to have that, you know, like we want to, like, I'm looking for feedback, I guess, and for us to make like some of the decisions about what that could look like, and then for us to like build out and suggest back to Aussie. And so I'm looking for, and I would like initial thoughts in this meeting. Happy to, if it's more helpful for folks, because I know we haven't that as a group before. If folks want some time to like write back, respond back, and we can do some of this via email, I think that's good too. And like we can set a deadline. But those were like my initial thoughts, because we haven't worked together as a group before, so I can't know yet how we work yet. So I'm asking for information.
I mean, I really like it. I mean, I think it's a good idea, like you said, that there probably does need to be a cap, because if it's not, then of course it could be overwhelming. And the different groups that you mentioned, I think are a really great starting place. We can talk about if we forgot anybody, but thank you for one, including SPED, because I was going to suggest make sure we have SPED in here, because I know in the grad requirements they're talking about a different they're trying to figure out like how we can get more folks a diploma instead of a certificate, and that piece of it, but also with the families. I'm not sure, like, do we want to include students in this, like, you know, like high schoolers? Is that something we wanted to do? I know we have our student representatives, but I just didn't know if we wanted to think beyond our student reps to have other student voices. Again, like you said, I'm just thinking out loud with you all.
Yeah, I'm suggesting that we do have some student seats. And actually, now that I'm saying it out loud, I didn't specify, but I would hope that we have some current students who are high school age, but also possibly some recent graduates, I think could be helpful. And I am suggesting that they be part of the open call for applications. So that for teacher voices, for parent voices, for student voices, and if there, and I don't know if we want a general category that's like community or advocate, something like that. But I'm suggesting that we would share it with our SAC and say, like, we encourage folks to apply, but also it will go beyond that. So if there's a high school student who's not already engaged in our SAC, they could apply for this opportunity as well, or a recent graduate. I don't know how folks feel about recent graduates, but I have found that young people who have gone through our K through 12 system and are close enough to that experience, but also have had the experience of what transition looks like and how prepared they were for their next steps. That tends to be really valuable feedback.
I like the recent graduate part. Like, would that also, and that also like for families too, or like maybe for even like teachers, like let's say someone's like, you know what, like I retired, but they retired like last year, but they taught 12th grade or something like that. Is that like for everybody?
Wait, say that
Or
again.
so when you talk about, I love the idea about like recent graduates, because I think that's important because they've gone through the system as it is, and okay, what's working, what's not working, right? So I'm also thinking under the lens of, okay, does that apply to like families? Well, hey, like my student graduated last year, they're now in their first year of college. Or like I'm a teacher and like I may not be teaching anymore, but I just stopped teaching or something like that. Like I was just trying to understand the premises of like when you talk about recent people, is that just for students or could that apply to everybody?
Well, I would say for what I was describing, for a student, I was saying we should differentiate and we should try to have some current high school students, and then we might want to have one or two recent graduates, right? I am also suggesting that we should make a decision about if we want a broader, like, community member category, which would lend themselves to some of the folks you just described. Because I do think that I would expect that we would want, on my list, there are current educators, current parents. It doesn't say current, but educators, parent, like those kind of perspectives I think are important. But there also might be someone who doesn't necessarily fit into one of those categories. I feel like parent can be a bit restrictive, family member, guardian, like, who might also have valuable feedback.
Understood. Thank you.
One thing that I did not do in this is I did not put hard or fast dates and timelines. Part of my reasoning for that was because we have not received another update from OSSI. I think it would be helpful to talk about, which is why I'm kind of focusing a little bit more on the composition and some of our goals. And then I would expect that we could share this with OSSI, to your question, Representative Henderson, earlier in the conversation about what would be our communication with OSSI, just to get clearer on timeline, because I didn't know what to share, and I didn't know, I don't have their most recent thinking, and so I didn't want to be presumptuous.
Yeah, it's awesome to come to the working session next week.
Yeah, I believe they are.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, I thought.
So that information is not in here. Two other things I think I would like to just call attention to, so I can be as open about what's in my brain as possible for folks to respond to. I suggested that we have some type of landing page or website. I am thinking about, so when I chaired the governance committee, because there were multiple steps to that process and people were following that work in particular, we put everything on like a little microsite, so folks could see from like, hey, we had focus groups, here's what came out of that. We had engagements, here's what came out of that, right? Like that's something easy to track, to be transparent to the public, I think is helpful. I am also, I guess, thinking about us being able to develop like some type of like more concrete work plan as we talk to Aussie. That's really important to me. But again, I don't know. I don't know what I don't know. And I also want to leave space for if there are other ways that, like if there's anything that folks feel like it's not included here, that would be helpful to know too. But I tried to do as best of an organized brain dump as I possibly could.
I think it would be good to have a little bit of time to put comments on this paper, but I think it's pretty close to where we need it to be.
Okay. That makes sense to me. And I anticipated that folks might need some time. And, you know, do we want, I know the working session is next week. Do we want to set a timeline for feedback? Do we want to share that, like share our initial thoughts around composition with OSCE in advance? Like what would the committee desire?
You mean in advance of the working session?
Yeah. We can just flag for them that it's coming. I mean, I just, you know, I'm looking for agreement around how fast we want to move and when we want to share information with OSCE. And if there's any, and also thinking about if there's anything we might want from them at the working session, we might want to communicate that sooner rather than later.
I like us having questions ready for Aussie.
I'm going to repeat
And
that.
maybe by,
I'm sorry,
oh,
LaJoy.
I was saying like, I think we should have,
Yeah, go ahead.
oh, can you hear me now? Sorry.
Yeah, it's clearer.
It's clear. Okay, sorry. I think we should have questions for Aussie and like have them ready. So that way also too, like those, everybody can hear those questions, all members, and so that we're all on the same page as well. And then it gives Aussie a chance to respond to the group. And then two, I forgot my train. I forgot. Oh, maybe like, should this be in, it's Wednesday now. So should this be in by like Monday or Tuesday if they're coming on Wednesday? Maybe Monday.
I'm sure they would want more time than even if we got them questions right now, they would probably
because today's
need
Wednesday.
more time. Yeah.
So how about this? Is it fair that folks take some time with just like the composition and initial thoughts and share them back by Monday? And at like, let's say Monday midday. And then, because I'm assuming that we can kind of work in bullets, that kind of thing. And then Kathleen, I'm willing to also do some lifting. But that at the latest Tuesday midday, we will just share with Aussie our initial thinking around what a task force could look like, what some of the goals are, and what like the composition would be. I do want to just state that my goal would be for Aussie to join us in this work and it be collaborative. But I am suggesting that the state board do this regardless. And I am not necessarily posturing this as an ask for permission. I'm asking for partnership. I don't know if folks have immediate reactions to that, but I wanted to be upfront with how, with my thoughts and not assume others' thoughts or comfort with that approach.
I agree with you.
Yeah, I think that's fine. We need to do the community engagement regardless. And I think the timeline you put out is fine on our end. I also wouldn't be surprised if they want more time then like they might not be able to respond on Wednesday.
Yes, I think that is a healthy expectation. But yes. So yes, I think that's a healthy expectation. I am not I would not think it's fair to ask them to have a like you gotta say yes, you gotta say no to this as it is. But I do want awareness. Like I try not to surprise people, right? And so I want them to at least just have some awareness that we discussed this and that we would be looking for their partnership. And as we transmit it, probably also what requests for if they want to have a meeting about it or like what, you know, what it looks like to come to some decision as well. In addition to the timeline around just like they're thinking around the larger work.
Madam Chair, is it possible, like maybe between like tomorrow and Friday, maybe to send them like a quick email, like I guess from the committee saying like, hey, like this is coming down the pipeline, you know, just so they are aware and we can give them, you know, all of our thoughts and, you know, more information and bullet points and questions, you know, like you said on that Tuesday date. So that way it gives them, I guess, more time to digest all of the information. Because how soon do we want to start, I guess, like the community group, you know what I mean?
I don't think we know the answer to the house and the other things. Just because
Okay.
Again, because some of this goes back to the work. Like when is the timeline of the work? What do they have? Like we don't where it's a
Understood.
you know,
Okay.
like
Got it.
those are things. I don't think it's a secret that this is happening given we've already had a conversation with the deputy mayor. And OSSI reports to the deputy mayor's office. I think I'm thinking more so of like in the spirit of just like we're saying, you know, certain things we don't know, just being kind of upfront with like, this is our latest and greatest thinking. You don't have to say back to us on Wednesday, but if this jogs some thoughts for your presentation, or when you hear the report out from the committees, you are not surprised. Because that right, and I would think that we would want to ask to say to Aussie, what would you need? What would you need to kind of work with us on this, right? Like, do you want to set up a meeting to discuss? Do you want to, right? Like, or is it like how do we get to that place of partnership? What's necessary? Like, do you want to partner and what do we need to do to get on the same page?
Understood. Thank you.
I can add your proposal into a document in SharePoint so that we can all collaborate on that and share
Thank
that out.
you. That would be amazing. I know that we are over. We're like super over. We didn't follow any of the rules for today. We do have one more item. Can folks stay with us for about 15 minutes as we start to talk about goals and priorities? I feel like scheduling is not a whole long needed thing, but I do want to. I know I have something to do at 6, and I need to travel there, so I need to leave at 5:30. Is that okay with folks?
I'm about to pick up a kid, so there may be extra noise from my end, but I'm still able to listen and engage.
Okay. If it's okay, I'm going to move us on to committee goals and priorities, which is the last thing. I know we have high school graduation requirements as work in this committee. We have been referred the education as a civil right. I do want to ask if there's anything else that folks would like to consider on that list of things. Those are the 2 things that I'm knowledgeable about.
Madam Chair, I have a clarifying question.
Mm-hmm.
So in our retreat that we did, when we were choosing the committees, and then we all decided that SPED would be, you know, that we would raise up SPED and like in each of the committees. So each of the things that we talk about, like, do each of them just have a sped component, or do we just talk about like sped separately? Like, or no offense, are you all envisioning, okay, LaJoy, like, how would you like to do sped? Because I know it was like my suggestion, and so I don't mind taking on that work. I just would like to know what the group thinks and how you all will want to do that.
It's up to you all. My understanding from that discussion was that it would be sort of infused into everything. So you mentioned like ways that we are talking about how, like the particular questions around special education that we have with graduation requirements around like certificate versus diploma, around certain credits, around like potential accommodations or modifications. I didn't understand it to be a separate question, but it again is all up to you guys.
Yeah, I mean, I don't personally, I think that we have certain like equity concerns and other things that we always want to consider. I think that if there are specific things, so like for me, with the graduation requirement work, one of the things that has been important to me is that we have a clear pathway for special education students to get a diploma. I think that's appropriate. I think the question is there work in this committee that relates to college career readiness that is specific to SPED work? Like, where would that come up? I would imagine that is a question we should be asking ourselves, a filter. I personally don't see it as a separate work strand, but I also don't know how others are thinking about it. And so we decide things as a group. And so I'm sharing that is my contribution to the group. And I'm looking for others in the group to speak up as well.
I was gonna say, and I know everyone's traveling. Thank you, Madam Chair, for that. I just like wanted to make sure that it's infused in everything that we do. When I said separate, I meant like, okay, LaJoy, like we know you do SPED. Can you just infuse that or help us think about it, because it relates to everything. So like college career and readiness, like when you think about careers, I'm thinking about, okay, students who have IEPs and their transition planning. I'm thinking about DDS. I'm thinking about RSA. Like there's still like SPED is infused into everything. And so I just wanted to make sure that we're uplifting that and including that, because that's what the board voted on.
Mm-hmm.
As we talk about priorities for the committee, I just wanted to make sure that was raised.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. So are there other things? And I can't, I'm sorry, but I don't have it in front of me. And Kathleen, you might be able to, or Jen, you might be able to best remind, is there anything that is also carried over from
Yes.
last?
Well, kind of. So Representative Best put in the chat Civics Education Week, and we can talk about that, and also whether it belongs here or with student engagement, because there seemed to be, or student experience, because there seemed to be interest from Representative Goulet there.
Okay.
And then the committee had also discussed, I know the timing has been pushed, but the health and PE standards, and potentially doing a student survey to see like what has been most impactful for you in your health and PE education. What do you feel like was missing? I had a very insightful discussion today with, oh my gosh,
Sarah
Shaw from the Education Research Collaborative.
Oh,
because they support research that different agencies do about how a survey maybe isn't the best option to get the kind of information we were looking for. Because I think a representative sample of students would probably just say like, it's fine, or have like not a ton of insights on specific things, but maybe talking to certain students who like have a more vested interest in health, like the Health Sciences Academy or DOSA, or just like certain other organizations that like think about that more from a student perspective. Doing like focus groups or something like that might be more effective. I think now there is still a question of like timeline because of
Right.
Aussie, but that's something the committee had
Yeah,
in process.
yeah, I don't know. I don't know if or when this will come back up, right? I also don't know if there are going to be other things that Aussie puts in its place, like if there are other standards. I would like us to consider some space around how do I put this? Learning about some of the things that we more recently have passed. I would like the committee to be intentional around, and I suggested this at the end of last year, and of course it's been busy and we've been in transition a bit, but us to start to get some school visits on the books to see how social studies, social emotional learning, and financial literacy are going, so that we're able to just get a better understanding of what, as we pass standards, what the implementation looks like, and kind of hear from some. So I would like that to be a bit of a body of work. Like, okay, we passed it, and like, here's what's happening now, and for this committee to kind of help the board stay abreast and learn about those things. I don't know if other people have like thoughts or feelings about that, but that is of particular interest to me.
My feeling is just keeping the most space for grad requirements. I don't have any other specific areas of work in mind right now.
I largely agree with you around that. For me, that is the most important conversation for this committee, but also just for the board as far as things we are responsible for and are in our purview. And so I largely agree with that. When it comes down to, and when I want to be explicit in what I mean by space. I mean time, I mean capacity, I mean, like, effort, because we have to get this done. Last call for if there is anything else, with the acknowledgement that we do have some outstanding questions to Aussie about both the timeline for graduation requirements and just standards proposals in general. But that is just true for this committee always.
I would like for us, in the work that we're doing, I would like for us to spend some time on like sped transition, but depending on like what's going on with the grad requirements and the capacity of this committee, like that's just something I was thinking down the line. I just wanted to put it out there so that way you guys are aware. That's all.
Do you see that as separate from graduation?
Yes. And it's not so much, yes, because we're talking about like them getting like either like a certificate or diploma, but the way the transition process starts, it actually starts in 9th grade at 14. And you know how we kind of look at like basically like teacher retention and and how we do different things like that. I would like for us to look at, okay, how many folks are actually getting transition services, and like how could we do that better? Like, I understand there's RSA, there's DDS, there are all these different things, but the community has shared with me there are struggles. And so when I was talking to President Patterson about it, he was like, okay, that's going to have to come out of a committee. And so when I was thinking about transition, I'm thinking about, college and career readiness. It's like, okay, this is a part of that college and career and life capacity that is also separate from them getting a certificate or a diploma. That's a part of transition planning. That's not all of transition planning. But again, I know graduation requirements take priority, so that's just something that we can think about down the line. I was just putting it out there so that way folks know. That's all.
I mean, I think there's, for me, a clear connection between the two topics. Obviously, there's some differences. But I think one of the recommendations from the last task force, like 2017, 2018, was for every student to be doing like graduation, like
Transition planning.
But yeah, essentially like a plan starting in, I think it was elementary school, and then revisiting it in middle school, revisiting it at the beginning of high school. Like, what is your plan going forward? And obviously there's like specific extra things that would have to be in like a sped transition plan, and like compliance is important there. But I think we want all of our students to be thinking about what direction do I want to go? What do I need to get there? And like being more intentional about that. I think part of that is what the grad profile is doing on like a large scale, thinking about like, what do we want people to accomplish when they graduate? But then those plans or things like that are like, what steps do students need? What steps need to happen to get students there? So I think in my mind, the topics are connected, but I think like,
Yeah, so
and I saw you adding the panel topic suggestions. So thank you for using that document.
let's start with how that shows up in the graduation conversation.
Okay.
Because I don't think, and I do want us to think of graduation requirements as beginning to end, not just like 12th grade, right? So that would be aligned with what you're talking about, like starting earlier. Like that is a fuller conversation. And then if there are, as we go through that conversation and we do that work, if there are places where that is not addressed, because one of the things that I would also just anticipate is that as we do community engagement, as we gather information, as we talk to experts, all the different things, that there also might be some, in addition to where we want to change or make changes to the requirements, that there are recommendations we might have as a board.
Okay, cool. That's helpful. Thank you.
So, all right, it is 5:27. If it's okay, I think that feels like the list for now, with the acknowledgement that there's a couple places we need to ask questions. I am going to make the suggestion that we stick to our timeline as far as the giving feedback on the composition of the task force and sharing with OSCE. We also just communicate that one of the things that has us in a holding pattern a bit is like their latest and greatest thinking. I do anticipate we'll get a lot of that at the April working session, but just kind of like some questions around timeline and next steps for working with them. I think that will also help us start to transition into, hopefully for next meeting, a bit more about work planning. The thing that we did not discuss, and it's 5:28, excuse me, I'm sorry, it's a bit more about the education as a civil right and what we do with that.
I can add the draft that President Patterson shared also to SharePoint, if you all want to kind of take a look at that and comment. But I know there's also other questions about like process. I don't know how you all want to address.
Mhm. Yeah. So, I mean, I think that's helpful, really helpful, Kathleen. Thank you. As far as adding the resolution to SharePoint, I do think we need to discuss um, what next steps should look like and come back to the board um, with a proposal. I know that we are well over time. And so I want to ask if folks have immediate thoughts, if they want some time to sit with their thoughts for a little bit, and we can start email correspondence about this, if that's something folks want to suggest. I personally think I have a couple of things at top of mind. One of the things that I think is important, and one of the biggest questions here is about just like what is a quality education and being on the same page around that. Um, I um, I think that how we get to that definition is something that could be explored, and I think can be, and we can lend some time to. I'm worried that if we just talk about what do people have the right to, or having a right without defining the what it is, that that is not as helpful because it feels a bit it doesn't it like what I receive is that folks do want to ensure quality, but I'm not so sure that we have a shared definition or expectation around that. Um, and so those are my thoughts. I also think that is closer to work that we are equipped to do. But that's my 2 cents. If it is also, I will also like to suggest, I know how familiar folks are with some of the other materials that have been shared. Like I know the Washington Lawyers Committee, not just testified, but submitted some things. We can also just make some time to schedule and put this as a follow-up meeting for like, all right, here's what's been discussed. What do we want as next steps kind of thing. But I'm looking for.
In the chat, Representative Best said email works.
Email works. Okay. So let's move some of that conversation to email. And I think that's the last thing outside of scheduling. We would like to set up a standing time for this meeting. And when I say standing time, I mean, like if it's a third Tuesday or whatever it is. And so it would be helpful if folks can share like some like blackout dates, that kind of thing. And we can use that to get like a doodle poll. Because instead of every time going, okay, we're going to schedule, we would really just like to have a standing time. And if it's this time, I personally am okay with that. Because this is the fourth Wednesday. Noting that these meetings will always be virtual. I see LaJoy in the chat is saying Wednesdays work for her.
I don't know now.
That works for me as well.
Okay. All right. So is it okay that, and I don't know if anybody's like opposed to this time, we can just set this as the standing time, the fourth, what is this? The fourth Wednesday of the month at 4?
Sounds good to me. Oh, well,
I think
is it possible?
next
Sorry.
month is.
Oh.
Hold on, anything's possible. What's going on?
Next month is the public meeting. That's just what I want to say.
Is it possible not to be during the workday?
It's possible. What you talking? What's your workday?
I mean, just good point. Is it possible like anytime after 5?
I'm looking for confirmation from other folks. I'm open to 5.
That's fine. If it was possible for 5. It's just increasingly more difficult to get 4 o'clock times on the books.
I get it.
I was just saying that the fourth Wednesday next month is the public meeting. It's moved. So if we wanted to say the last Wednesday instead, that works. Because it was moved for spring break.
Oh, I'm like, why is it moved? But
Yeah,
see that on my calendar. I mean, I'll be on travel that last Wednesday, but I can figure it out. I can do it. It's virtual, so it's whatever.
I mean, if y'all want to meet for an hour and then go right into the public meeting, we could also do that. But I feel like maybe you don't want to do that. It's up to you.
Well, it couldn't be 5.
Oh, that's true.
So maybe how about this? Here's the compromise. Let's stick with Wednesday. Let's just send a doodle poll with like afternoon times for Wednesday, like between, I don't know, 3 and 6 or something. And see what works for next Wednesday. That like if folks want the last Wednesday or if they want to do it before the public meeting, and then after that, we'll say 4th Wednesday. Is that cool? Given we have a change in the schedule.
Yeah, it works for me.
Okay. Perfect. All right. Thank you guys for a productive first committee meeting. Thanks, Kathleen, as always, and Jen for staffing us and keeping us on track. Thanks for your patience and flexibility in staying over. Happy to adjourn us at 5:35. Thanks, everyone. Have a good evening.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great one. See you soon.